Welcome to De-Stress Your Business, the podcast where we show you how to get incredible results in your business without constant stress. I'm Alexis Kingsbury, a serial entrepreneur and founder at AirManual, and I'm joined by my co-founder and co-host, Paddy Mann. Morning, Paddy.
Good morning.
Morning. So, on a previous episode, we looked at how we can get over 1,000 applicants for job openings at our businesses, including AirManual. And that's despite not being a household name, not paying above average salaries, not paying a fortune for recruiters or adverts. Instead, we focus on hiring for a specific role rather than trying to hire a generalist who's great at everything. We focus on what makes the company and role exciting to the right people, and we spend time creating an advert that really sells these benefits. Now, of course, getting 1,000 or more applicants, although great, as covered in the previous episode, it does introduce a new challenge, which is how do you even start to manage this kind of quantity? So that's what we're going to cover today. So, Paddy, we've had, in some cases, over 2,000 applicants for some roles. So what can go wrong? Let's start there in terms of what for businesses goes wrong when they end up with lots of applicants.
Yeah, I remember the first time we got this kind of volume of applicants, and it was because we put so much focus into the start of that journey and getting the advert right and going to the right places to advertise it. And suddenly we had this thing which really resonated, and we just got this huge influx of developers applying for the job, which is on the firstly, awesome. This is brilliant. What we want is a big volume at the top of the funnel so that we can find the right person at the bottom. This should be a good thing. But you also think, this is kind of slow. It's like, oh no, this is going to screw me as a manager, screw us as a team. You can see the big derail, and it's coming at a time when you are already under pressure. You're hiring because you have more work than you have the capacity to deal with at this point in time, or that you're getting to that point. And so being derailed and having to basically invest all of your time trying to manage that kind of volume of candidates, it's scary, it's stressful, and the repercussions of that when it slows down the projects you're working on and any deadlines, customer commitments, internal, external, that is incredibly stressful, and it can quickly lead to late nights and all the rest of it. So firstly, it's a big derail is the problem. Secondly, it's about how you then deal with that. And I can see kind of two things happening. And I can see, firstly, the easiest way to deal with it is to just ignore a big chunk of the applicants. And I say this is the obvious one. It's actually the one I've seen many other businesses do when they've got a large number. They basically go, well, we got 300 applicants, so I took one big pile of CVs and moved them over and went through the first 50 and chose, the 5 to 10 interviews that I'd take from there. That's the easiest, quickest way they have to deal with it. They haven't got a process in place that will work any better for that. And while that can work, it essentially means you've taken an asset in the volume of candidates you've got and removed it, and instead you've got a much smaller pool. And I know from experience of having a much larger pool that it's not like there's one A player in every batch of 50. It can be that there's only one or two A players to the standards that you finally get to set yourself with a larger pool in that whole batch of 1,000 or 2,000 that we're getting. So it's really important for us that we do find a way to work it through. And then finally, if we do that, if we either remove people or if we're just slow about it, then it creates a bad experience for the candidates. If you take 2 weeks to get the first response out, then they could be looking elsewhere. They're probably applying elsewhere. If they're one of the best candidates, they will feel ignored. And if you're going to have a multi-step approach to your recruitment, which we would highly recommend to filter down and get the best candidates, then that kind of delay and lag time will kill the whole process. So there's these three big issues. There's this big derail for the team. There's a risk of not actually getting to use this big pile of applicants you've got. And then there's this big risk of creating a bad experience for the candidates and affecting your reputation and your ability to hire the ones that are best for the job.
Yes, no, and I've seen business owners kind of deal with this a couple of ways that creates a bigger problem for them. So one is to decide, oh well, I don't want that many applicants, and as we've covered before, like deciding that, oh yeah, I'll go back to the old route of I get three three CVs, and I review those, and I hire the least worst of those is not a great way to build talent in your organization. So you do want large numbers of candidates in the top of the funnel so that you can do that. But the other mistake I've seen for business owners is because they don't prepare for having large numbers of candidates, they then end up either failing to communicate with those candidates, and that's really poor for your employer brand, and actually can lead to a load of extra work because in fact it takes up more time because they then contact you individually saying, hey, I haven't heard back, I just want to check that my the reply hasn't gone into spam or something like that. And so you end up having to manage all of that anyway. And of course you thought, oh yeah, I'm doing this great time-saving technique called ignore it. But actually it doesn't work that way, and it's appalling for your brand and all that kind of stuff. You may even get then reviews on Glassdoor and so on that say, oh yeah, no, I applied and they didn't even bother to contact me, avoid, and that makes it harder for you to recruit in future. But then the other mistake I've seen is a business owner who decided, oh, well, I've got large number of candidates that I need to update. I will, because they haven't prepared in advance, they decided they'd send an email to them to kind of let them know, blanket, like, I can't remember whether it was either the position is now filled or whether it was, sorry, there's going to be a delay. But what I do know is that rather than using BCC, they accidentally used CC. And so everyone, hundreds of candidates, all got each other's contact details. They all were basically invited, as it were, into really having a go at the employer, and of course replying to all. And it was an absolute shitstorm, frankly. Like, it was horrible. And of course, entirely unintentional on the business owner. She was trying to do the right thing by communicating, but it absolutely bit her. And the answer to that is you need a better approach to this, right? Like, you need an approach that makes this easy to manage and doesn't require either lowering your ambitions or indeed knee-jerk reactions that cause a big problem. So how do, for example, take us through in our organisation, and particularly if you're generally the hiring manager for software development roles, so it's the area that you know in most depth. Take us through how do we get it down from 2,000 plus to a more manageable level at the very outset?
Cool. Yeah. So what we're going to be doing in the entire recruitment process is finding ways to filter it down, and we want to be really time efficient, because frankly, even if you've only got 10 applicants, then you don't want to be spending a huge amount of unnecessary time in an ineffective way. But when you get up to hundreds or thousands of applicants, which should be your target, certainly getting to the kind of hundreds level, then you really need to find effective ways to filter it down. And you want it to make good use of your time. You also want to make it really good use of your candidate's time. So one of the things that we're going to need to do is go through multiple phases, and you don't want to ask candidates to invest hours of their time up front when there are things that you could be filtering out with them only investing 5 minutes or 1 hour or so on. And that creates a very efficient process for you, but it creates a better experience for them. I know that when we get to the end of our process, we have candidates who have gone through all the steps who rave about the experience despite not getting a job. And part of that is that we respect them at every stage of the journey. We make sure that we're keeping them engaged and communicating well, but we're also making sure that we are using their time in a really considerate way. And so one of the things we're looking to do is to be time efficient for both parties. The second thing is, in doing that, we want to assess whether they're a good fit for the role. And essentially two things that we're going to be looking for. One is whether they have a values fit with our company, which means, do they have the same types of behavior? Do they value the same types of behavior that we do? And for us, that's things like focusing on impact and paying attention to detail and looking to enjoy the journey. And then secondly, do they have the right skills for or competencies for the specific role that we're looking to hire into? And so there's going to be multiple phases, but the first one is the classic, and where when I look at other businesses, most of them, sorry everyone, most people are getting this wrong, because the first thing you do is you put up your job ad and you've made it amazing. You get a big pool, and you ask people to send in their CV or resume and maybe a covering letter, and that is unfortunately not a great way of starting to filter. The CV or resume is, well, it's not specific to your company, your values, or the skills that you're looking for. It does allow them to include a lot of stuff which is less relevant but impressive, which can then lead to you favoring them for reasons that you shouldn't. It includes a lot of information which isn't relevant at all and is frankly just distracting. It takes a long time to read, and it's really difficult to do a fair side-by-side comparison of two candidates. You end up seeing things like, oh man, this guy worked for Google, that must be amazing. I've done this, I've done that. Well, one of our first jobs, we had like 10 candidates, and you saw the Google and you're like, that's the one, that's going to be the keeper, can't wait for him to start. And the reality was that person was useless. And if you've worked in any of these big companies, then yes, there are some superstars, but there is a lot of mediocre. It would be a compliment. And it's the same for years of experience. Years of experience is not a great indicator of them being amazing at the job. It tells you something, but not as much as you will try to read into it when you see it on a CV. And so the CV, it not only it takes a lot of time, but it also sends you in the wrong direction and making bad decisions. There's an alternative, as you would imagine, and for us that's simply we ask 3 questions. Why? Because it's quick for them to answer, quick for us to review, and we can use those 3 questions to focus on the things that are really important and that we can start filtering in on. And we see that just by asking 3 questions, we can just get rid of 50% of the candidates straight away because they don't put in any effort. 1-word answers, people that don't bother, people that have terrible written English, which is going to be a no-go in a remote company. We see 30 to 40% are pretty good. And then we see 10 to 20% are excellent. And with just a written answer, we can review it really quickly. We can go, okay, that person is on it. They're demonstrating what we're looking for, and we're able to filter down in a really effective way.
Yeah, and I love this approach because it was an absolute game changer for us when we changed from sifting CVs to using this. And it's funny because we do still ask candidates to attach their CV at the beginning. In theory, it's because, and so from the candidate's perspective, it's so that we can refer to it later down in the journey, and that does happen. In practice, the real reason that we do that is because if we didn't let people attach their CV to the application form, they'd send it as an email separately, and we would then have to reconcile those back up to the applications, which would take longer. Whereas the reviewing of the 3 questions that we do without looking at the CVs that have been attached at all takes us like a really short period of time, right, Paddy? It's like under 30 seconds, I think, for short question for poor answers. It's literally 3 to 5 seconds on average. I think it's 15 to 20. And we know this because we calculate how many applicants have we got, therefore, and then we assign it to, delegate it to people, and we know how long they take to do it and average it out and so on. So we know that it's a much faster way of doing it, and we'll delve into those questions in a moment and why we chose them. But I think that's a key thing for people to get over, is the idea of, I use CVs and that's the most effective way. You mentioned earlier that there's loads of problems with using CVs, the time it takes to review them, and the fact that it doesn't even necessarily give you the information that you need. One of the other things you mentioned was choosing people for the wrong reasons. And I think there's 2 sides to that. One, as you explained, overemphasizing things like, oh, this person worked at Google, or this person's got 15 years of experience, or this person, has got this really cool hobby, which aren't relevant. But also on the negative side, it risks adding either conscious or unconscious negative bias, where people might, for example, if we take a fun one, people might look at someone's hobby and say, oh, the scrapbooking, they're into scrapbooking. Oh, I bet they're weird and boring. And it's like, that's entirely their perception, not the reality at all. And a real mistake to start putting those judgments on what someone might be like based on a throwaway thing as part of a CV. But also, of course, you get more serious negative biases based on protected characteristics around whether it's gender, ethnicity, economic background, even educational background, all these sorts of things, which frankly don't matter. And we know it doesn't matter because, for example, I've hired into roles where we've not looked at the CV essentially until like end of the process. And I've hired people for roles who have come essentially straight out of university with maybe the odd bit of placement experience, and they have won and beat other applicants who have got 10 years of experience in the role that they're being hired into. And yet, in terms of values fit and skills fit and the competences that we looked at, we had this better candidate, and this candidate actually struggled and was struggling to get a job because they hadn't got experience, right? Which is ridiculous because I'm sure, Paddy, you know who I'm talking about. That's amazing hire, like superb hire that's both delivering at an excellent level in the role in which they were hired into, but then has expanded and is now adding strategic value and so on. Like, incredible. And so, I think you've got to dump those CVs, or at least, as I say, allow people to attach them, but don't make reviewing them the starting point. So hopefully we've now smashed CVs to bits and people are saying, okay, give me the alternative. So what are the 3 questions that we use? And let's use the example of a developer role specifically. And how did we choose them?
Cool. Good question. So we've got three questions, and for every role we have, it's always 3 questions, but the questions do change. I'll take you through each of them and then explain a bit about it. So the first question is, what's your proudest achievement? It can be a personal project or something you've worked on professionally. Just a short paragraph is fine, but I'd love to know why you're proud of it. And in the question, I've said that it's a short paragraph. The form that we use, there isn't, it's designed to be a short paragraph. We are expecting 1 paragraph. Occasionally we see a few paragraphs or a few bullets. If it's a 1-word answer, then it will go into the no pile. But this isn't meant to be, a detailed story. So why are we asking this question? What's your proudest achievement? It could be a personal project or something you worked on professionally. And initially, it just sounds like any question that you could find from a website for a list of possible interview questions. And the answers will be interesting when you take that kind of approach. You will find interesting things about people. But we haven't just picked one at random as a way to start the filtering based on generic ways of finding good candidates. This question and all the others are really focused on the things that are really important for our organization. And I mentioned before, we've got core values, and core values describe the behaviors that we look for in people that we hire, that we encourage and nurture as we do onboarding, that we judge performance by. We use them throughout. We're going to need a separate episode to go into how to set core values and why they're so valuable. But this is one place we are using them. And in this case, we've got a couple of core values. One is focus on impact. And to us, that means that whatever you're doing within the company, within your team, you want to be focused on the end goal and the impact that's going to have for the company and the team and customers and everything else. And in engineering, in software developers, it's an all too common thing that people aren't, that people are focused on the technical merits of how beautiful their architecture is, but they forget about the actual impact this has for end users. and that makes it difficult for them to prioritize, and it can lead to entire projects being derailed and taking 10 times longer than they should. It leads to all sorts of challenges. And so in this one seemingly innocent question, we're starting to probe in there, and we're starting to go, have you got something which you've taken end to end? And that goes to another core value of ours, which has been proactive and dependable. And then where you focus on the value that really generated. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for these signs that you are aligning with core values, which we think are really important. And while there will be, as I said before, 50% of the answers will be rubbish. There'll be one word answer, complete nonsense, whatever. 30 to 40% will be okay. There'll be good answers, but not necessarily what we're looking for in our candidates. And then there'll be 10 to 20%, which are excellent. And these are really well written and really well articulate. This is something that I did. This is how I showed that I was responsible. And this is the impact that it had for the business, for the wider outside goals. And those are the ones that, really, really shine. Second question is, tell me about a technical book or article you read recently, why you liked it, and why I should read it. So again, this could be a generic question, but for us, it isn't. We did pick a technical book, and we could have said a non-fiction or wider one. But this is for a software engineering role. So we're looking for people who are, one, showing interest in their own area of the business, but really we're looking at another of our values, which is always looking to improve. So in our organization, we are looking for employees that without it being constant nagging or coaching or something that they see as homework, that they are actually looking and investing in their own self-development. It's something that me and Alexis do religiously. We are constantly reading business books, technical books, whatever books. We're investing in masterminds and courses and all sorts. And the value that we bring to the business through that is immense. And when we looked across other people in our organization, we saw the same. The ones that were investing in this way were bringing huge, huge value to the conversations, to business decisions, to the way they worked. And as a result, it became one of our values, and it's now something that we recruit for. We want to look for people who are actively doing it, not because it's something they have to, but because it's something that they want to and they will enjoy. And in doing so, we find candidates that just fit in so much better into our organization and ultimately can thrive. So that's question 2. Question 3, and this is the third one, third and final one. So tell me about an AirManual feature you really like and why. And so AirManuals are a product. It's something that they can look at and research online. They can go in, we can set them up so they can have a play. And so there's an obvious one, which is just to demonstrate that they're invested in this application, because it's very common that people, they spray and pray. They look at 10 different companies and put in applications without really understanding what you do. So this is, as a general thing, it does tell us that they've paid attention and understand what we're about, which is important. But again, it also helps us to assess on one of our values. And this one, as well as focusing on impact, because we want them to think about which ones actually which features make a real difference. There's another one, which is attention to detail. And so we're looking for people that really kind of get to grips with an area and don't just kind of superficially say, this is what I read on the homepage. If they've basically regurgitated the content, which frankly I might have written myself, I'm going to spot that. Whereas if they've gone in, thought about it, and been able to present back their thinking on why it's important, then that's amazing. So 3 simple questions, but they're not random questions. All of these are really good indicators of whether people are aligned in some way with our core values and therefore likely to be successful when we go through the rest of the process and start interviewing them down.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and it's funny because of course these are questions that in many cases we've developed together, iterated on, used in different roles, and iterated again, and so on. But it's so funny, like sitting back and hear you go through it, because I'm just going, oh, that's so smart, like that's awesome, like the way in which like that particular question is structured and so on. But that's come through iteration. It's not because we're just geniuses that immediately vomited out 3 questions and they were perfect. Like we've iterated. But also in terms of the underlying, how did we end up with those questions? as you say, it's looking at, okay, what are the core values that we need to assess throughout our recruitment process? What are the skills that we're looking for this role? Fine, that's your starting point. But then what you emphasized there beautifully was, for this particular role, what are some of the most common hurdles that they fall at? And I seem to remember that actually we didn't used to have focus on impact as early in the process for developer roles. I think we had that more for salespeople because we thought, oh, well, they need to be enthusiastic and so on, so we'll put that early. And so we'd have it later. But the problem was you'd end up with a lot of candidates that you're managing through the entire process and then suddenly having a load that fall at that hurdle. And of course, that's really time inefficient for you and for them. And so what we did was say, well, actually, what could we have put in earlier on to really identify this core value that a lot of developers really struggle with, which is focus on the impacts. They get too into the detail, too into the, oh, this is cool or technically difficult or whatever, and not enough about the why. And so all 3 questions that you've taken us through have all got a why in there. So it's, proudest achievement, why you're proud of it. Technical book or article you liked, why I should read it. And AirManual feature you really liked, and why. And it's the why that is the core of focus on impact, our number 1 core value, that has been embedded all through that. And then some of the other core values and so on that we've included in there. And so I really like that as an approach. And so for people listening, you're going to require some iteration, but it isn't that hard. Like when you actually think about what are your core values, and as Paddy says, we'll cover in a subsequent episode how to come up with those if you've not got them, but list out your core values, identify for this role, what are the ones that they're likely to struggle with the most, and come up with some questions that will allow you to very quickly sift and identify whether that's right. So Paddy, quickly take us through, we've got those, we're getting those answers to those questions. How does this get managed? Because people might still think, oh, well, now I've got 3 full-on essays to read. Isn't that going to take me even longer than sifting some CVs? So how does this get managed? And also, how do we avoid this being a massive pain where you've got like 2,000 answers that you need to get through and you've got a load of people waiting for responses?
Cool. So one of the words that you've used a few times so far is iterate, or being iterative. And so what we don't want to do is treat this like a scientific experiment where we try and set up everything perfectly first time. We wait for all of the applicants, we hit number 2,000, and then we let everyone go at the same time with the way we've set it up at that moment in time. That is going to lead to a bad experience for the first people to apply because they're going to be waiting for ages until anything happens. It's going to give you no chance to iterate. It means that you're going to be swamped when you actually do decide to go in and start doing it. And yeah, it goes against what we're trying to do here. Instead, so what we're doing is as soon as we start getting applications in, we start reviewing them immediately. We want people, if they get a response with either a yes or a no, yes, you go to the next stage or not this time, and they get it quickly, within sometimes it's within hours, they will have their mind blown. If it's within days, it will be better than expected, and they will hold you in good regard for it. If it takes weeks, then this is going to hurt your whole process. So we get going immediately. These reviews, we've said it a few times, it's all about being time efficient. So for a poor quality answer, honestly, you will learn to spot it in seconds and be able to move on to the next one. So we want the poor ones to take less than 5 seconds. The good ones will need a bit more time. I often say 30 seconds, but I think Alexis has timed it, and it's more like 15 to 20 seconds on average. And that's not just us being quick. That's when other members of the team are doing it too, based on the level of detail they got and what you're looking for, which you start to see quite quickly. It becomes a really quick exercise. Now, one thing that we're going to be doing is iterating. So early on, if you're setting this up for the first time, I'd recommend you, the hiring manager, you review the first people. You work out how you are scoring them and write it down. So you say the good ones are well written and they demonstrate this and this and this, and this is a bonus mark. And you get that scoring clear, and then go, can I follow this consistently? And where you need to, you make tweaks. So early on, you're doing it, and this is giving you confidence that the process is working. And when you're happy with a candidate, you send them an email which says, great, you're going to the next stage, explains what that is. When you're less happy, you send them an email which says, I'm afraid not this time. You're not going to give a specific reason why, because that would be bonkers if you've got thousands of applicants. Yeah. But that doesn't mean you can't give a reason. You can pick up on what the normal reasons are for not letting them through. And you can share that, and they will value that to share. Typically, the best answers were really well written, demonstrated clear alignment with our core values. And so I'm afraid if you haven't got to this far, it's not necessarily that you've done a bad job, but you weren't in the top 10 to 20% based on this scoring. That bit of information would be really, really valuable. And once you're happy with this process, so you're able to go through it, the scoring's working, it's easy for me to send these emails, ideally a button click if you're doing it at scale, but there are various ways you can work it out to make it quick. Then you can start delegating this, and we've first delegated it within our team. And actually this part of the process, because it's so clearly defined in terms of how to review and what the rules are for saying yes or no, it's a really easy one to outsource. So there's actually the one part of the process where we tend to use a virtual assistant as a really cost-effective way to help get through the big pile of applicants that we can normally expect.
Yeah, love that, and it's a process that I hugely value in our business. It's made such a big difference, what's lovely as well is both for us as a team and what it does for the business, but also for the candidates. We get amazing feedback from candidates who say, "Wow, like I've applied to so many other roles and they just never get back to me." Like and yet people get really good experience, and so often we'll get positive reviews online, people promoting us, even though they got rejected, because you're able to deal with it in this really nice way, and I think that's really effective. That's not to say that all of the responses that we get are positive. I've got a few funny ones, which perhaps if someone reaches out and asks me, I'll share some of the examples where let's just say that your decision gets validated when they respond in an angry way after a somewhat reasonable rejection. But we can cover those another time, perhaps. But that's awesome. So thanks for taking us through that, Paddy. We've covered a lot. We've covered essentially why you shouldn't use CVs to filter candidates. We've talked about what can go wrong and how it takes a long time to do it if you're processing the number of candidates that you really should be, but also how it doesn't even help you make a great decision. And we've covered how to do a better job of that by using 3 questions that are not just grabbed off the internet, but are tailored based on the values in your organization and the competencies that you're looking for. And when you have that and you apply a bit more process and systems to it, you can make this incredibly fast so that you can literally be processing each of those candidates in seconds, not minutes or hours, which is what most businesses tend to do. So we've covered a lot of that on subsequent episodes. We'll explore then what do we do after that. Once we've done that first sift, how do we take them through the rest of the recruitment process to hire an A player? But for this episode, we'll leave it there. However, as regular listeners will know, we also run a weekly webinar on how to free up 15 hours per week and remove the constant stress of running a business without slowing down growth. So if you're interested in freeing up time and all sorts of things that we've talked about in the recruitment process here, you're going to absolutely love that webinar. It's typically on every Wednesday, 1 p.m. UK time. I think next one's in a couple of weeks. But you can find out more and register at www.airmanual.co/webinar. Now, a final note for our podcast listeners: as a new podcast, we do need your help. If you found the content today valuable, please take just 1 minute to leave an honest review. This will help us get the podcast more visibility and help more people. And if you're consuming this on social media right now, please do share it with other people, repost it, like it, subscribe, and so on. We'd really, really appreciate it. Otherwise, until next time, have fun.